And he said, and I'll remember this, you want to impress me, get your job done in the 40 hours. That's impressive. Different times call for different leaders with different skill sets that are bringing different messages.
Playing that back to you, what kind of leader are you in? What kind of time is Bosch in right now?
Being one of the first people to raise your hand and say, I'm willing to give it a shot, even though it's going to be imperfect, what I propose, but it gets the ball rolling. This is separating yourself very quickly. It certainly helps to try to cover your gaps, but at the same time, if you spend all your time trying to close your gaps, you won't be the person that got you to where you are based on your strengths. I saw, what leading with empathy and kindness brings. Anybody who gets to a role like this usually has worked for some pretty awesome people.
That's well put. Well, let me introduce you. Todd Hertzler, regional president, newly appointed regional president of Bosch Mobility Aftermarket, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Well, thanks so much for sitting down with me today, and thanks so much for hosting me in your beautiful penthouse here.
Thank you.
At the kind of new Bosch headquarters, right?
Yeah. We've been here for a little over 3 years. We came from Broadview, now in Oak Brook Terrace, which is kind of a center spot of the western suburbs of Chicago. And we've got the top floors of this building here in Oak Brook Terrace, which, the original intention was to have a little bit of an urban vibe in not downtown Chicago, but near downtown Chicago. So we can still pull talent from downtown and yet have the feel and the ability to utilize the suburbs. So, we like it. We got a great view of the city, and it's an inspiring place to come in.
Yeah, well, you can definitely see a beautiful view of the skyline from here. So the other thing I noticed is that the floor plan, I've been to other Bosch facilities, and the floor plan is very different. It's very open. Is this kind of the intention, or you just take over somebody else's space?
No, we gutted it from top to bottom, and the intention was to create more common space. So our old office was Cube City. If there was a wall you could put up, and you knew the guy who had the walls, you could put them up. And here we have it very, very open. Even the offices are depersonalized so that if somebody's not in the office, it can be used as a common space.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
But you look around and you see more common spaces than you see maybe individual spots. So the idea is that you get people moving and not stagnant in the same spot. But that's tough because especially now coming out of COVID and the meeting culture that we had, where you can invite everybody to every meeting all the time, and you somehow can end up with meetings from 6:30 in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. It would be easy to come in and plug in your headphones and sit at your desk and just be in telecons 24/7.
Yeah.
So we have to be a little bit more cognizant of the fact that we don't schedule now back to back meetings when people are in the office, because you have to get from floor 28 to 31. You've got to move from this place to that place. And you want to have a minute when you're moving from space to space, if you run into somebody, to talk about what's happening or something that maybe you hadn't planned for, and give that interaction. And you can't do that if you're booked from 6:30 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. So we have to change the culture though too at the same time if you want people present.
Well, it sounds like just in answering that question about the office space, you have a lot of ideas about what you're excited about in this role, and a lot of them are cultural in nature. So I would love to touch on as many of those as possible. I want to sit and learn with you today about you, about Bosch, about what you think the vision for the organization is. But to start, I guess you're very new to the role.
Yes.
Maybe 2 months.
Correct. March 1st.
And you spend a lot of time with Bosch, though. You've been at Bosch before this for quite a while.
19 years.
19 years.
Yep.
So I sit with a lot of executives in my role, and they range in tenure greatly. So a lot of them are, maybe in the middle of their tenure, and they're really excited about what they've done with the organization and where they want to kind of close out their tenure. Some of them are later in their careers, and they're reflective. They're in a kind of a teaching mode. Tina Hubbard, the CEO of HDA Truck Pride, I sat with her, and her framework on this was learn it, earn it, return it.
Yeah,
and so
that's cool.
Yeah, I thought it stuck with me.
I'm going to steal it.
She'd be happy about that. So if I'm diagnosing your spot correctly, coming into this role as regional vice president of Bosch Mobility
regional president.
Regional president of Bosch Mobility Aftermarket. Would you say you're in the earn it role right now, or you're? Yeah,
absolutely. There's a reason why I got the role. It's hopefully a lot of reasons, but one is that I helped develop the growth strategy as the head of sales. So it's a little bit about putting your money where your mouth is at a certain point and executing on the vision. So I think that's a big part of it. But I also think that a big part of it too is the fact that I've had a variety of different roles between different regions, at different levels with different customers and different channels, still mostly within the mobility aftermarket, but also making connections within our entire BBM space, our Bosch Business Mobility space. So on the OE side, as well as on the aftermarket side. So navigating kind of the internal politics and red tape is something that is a skill that can be used to develop our business as well.
How different is Bosch in the mobility aftermarket than the rest of Bosch? Just walking around this floor, it reminded me of how sprawling Bosch is as a company. There are refrigerators out there. I saw some tools. There are a lot of different divisions of Bosch, and many of them are, I would argue, kind of like consumer focused, right? They're B2C. I recognize the Bosch brand in my kitchen. I recognize it on my car as wiper blades. But I don't know of the mobility aftermarket as being a B2C business. Is that fair to say? Or is it more B2B, or are you trying to be? Is it both?
No, I think it's fair to say it's primarily B2B. It's not to say that we don't develop and engineer with the end user in mind, right? I mean, the slogan is invented for life, and that's not just for power tools or for appliances, that's for mobility as well. So I think it's fair to say that we begin with the customer in mind. Anybody who doesn't is probably missing the boat. But I think it's also fair to say that our business is designed more in a B2B fashion. Distribution of our product, we count on our partners to support us with that. And I don't see us pivoting majorly away from that in the near future. Yeah. We like the partners we've chosen. They bring incredible value to us in terms of helping support our product and communicate our message and all of this. So I think it's fair to say that we're a B2B company when it comes to distribution, at least on the mobility aftermarket side. But that if you're not thinking about the end consumer, if you're not thinking about the technician, and why the technician pulls a box, or what their thought process is, or what is really important to them, then you'll probably won't get the luxury of being a B2B if you're not thinking about the C.
Interesting. That's a really good perspective on that. You mentioned you were head of sales prior to this role. This sounds like a lot of responsibility, and don't take this the wrong way, but you seem kind of young.
That's kind of you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't get that very often, so I like passing that forward. Are you like, how old are you?
I'm 45.
Okay. And would it be fair to say that you've been kind of young in a lot of your roles? Because if you're 45 at a leadership role in Bosch, is that pretty typical?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's really no typical or atypical approach. I think I've had the luxury of working in a number of different roles that had 2 out of the 3 legs of the stool may be different, right? So maybe it was a sales function, but it was in Europe. Maybe it was a mobility aftermarket, but it wasn't frontline sales. It was in operations. So taking advantage of those opportunities to do something different and add another skill set and another feather to your cap over a period of time, it can create experiences in the aggregate. It can create experience in general in the aggregate if you can collect enough of those, whereby maybe you don't need to sit in the same role for 10 years.
Got it.
If you can collect those experiences and bring value back and the organization can see a return on that investment, then I think more opportunities will come. So I think in general, I'm not too old or too young for the role. I come with a little bit of experience in different areas of our business that I think when you combine them all together, gives maybe more experience than I would have otherwise.
Probably you phrased it probably better than I did, just directly asking about your age. But you talked about kind of taking advantage of opportunities. Can you walk me through your career at Bosch and try to spell out what some of those opportunities were and what it looked like to kind of raise your hand and actually seize those opportunities?
Yeah. So, as I said, 19 years. I won't go through the whole resume because it'll be boring. But I think if I break kind of it into chunks, I think about my time before I went to Europe on assignment, the time during my assignment, and the time since I've been back. Mm-hmm. And to me, I can kind of think of it in those three different phases because both my contributions as well as my development changed over those periods of time. So, coming out of my first role and then into a foreign assignment, and I was 4.5 years in Germany, did a short stint in Shanghai, but for the most part, 4.5 years in Germany, and went over with my wife and my I think he was 6 months old at the time when we moved, and then had my second son there. That's a challenging time, both personally and then professionally.
Being an American in Germany, and
then having kids there and raising kids there.
Oh, you had both of your kids there.
My oldest was 6 months when we moved, and then my youngest was born there.
Gosh, that's tough.
So this was, it was tough. And then, a year and a half in, I took my first leadership role there. So now you've got a young family in a foreign country in a first leadership role.
Do you speak German?
I do speak enough to get by. I was definitely better when I left. We can go and hang out at the bar in Germany and chat all we want with whoever we want. When it comes to a tough negotiation, I would rather switch to English.
But you didn't when you went there.
Correct. No.
Right? And your wife didn't?
Nope.
Okay. So this is all just trial by fire, throwing you right into the
trial
deep
by
end.
fire. My first day I came in and my boss at the time, a great guy, brought me over, full confidence. And we went into a team meeting. We had a department meeting.
That's a good way to start.
4 hours, this department meeting. I walk in, I've got my cell phone and my laptop. He says, no. We don't bring cell phones and laptops into these meetings. No, this was still kind of a little bit early. This would have been 2011. So it was still kind of on that precipice of smartphones.
Like flip phones.
Yeah, we were still flip phones. It wasn't all about being connected 24/7.
Yeah.
And especially there. And so we had a 4-hour meeting in German, and I sat there while my colleagues were writing feverishly as if their lives depended on every word that came out of his mouth.
In German.
And I walked out of there and walked into the HR person's office and said, I need to start German classes. And she said, okay, yeah, maybe in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, we can get to that. I said, no, I mean tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like I will be here if we have an intern that can come in and just chat with me and throw me some words and get me moving. But like, we need to start tomorrow.
But what did anyone expect you to take out of that meeting?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
But
it worked. Whatever you did, it worked. Yeah.
It worked because, I mean, it's, I'm a firm believer that necessity is the mother of invention. And unless you force somebody, it's very easy to switch back into an old habit. And with English is especially because people want to work on their English. So people are quick to switch with you. So until you're forced, you won't learn it. So for me, it was in retrospect, it was a gift. It was a total pain in the very beginning.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, it was a gift that I had the opportunity to do it and that I was given the latitude as well to maybe not be 120% contributor for a short period of time while I learned. And that was a big part of it.
So you mentioned the cell phone. Obviously, it was early in cell phones and the laptops, but the laptops, didn't show up in the meeting. They were left outside. What else was culturally different, about like how some of the cultural differences, good and bad?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I keyed in on really quickly was there's a different mentality when it comes to what's expected of you when you're in the office and then what's expected of you when you're out of the office. And you don't have to look very further to the fact that when you look at vacation schedules and time off away from work, and more importantly, work-life balance, you can't achieve that with the same mentality that you have in the U.S. of being always on. So there's an expectation that in some cases, and I'm guilty of it from time to time. If I'm out of the office for just a few days, I won't even turn my out of office on. Right. I'll just deal with it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'll just deal with it. Right. You'll respond. You'll forward things around.
And it kind of doesn't matter if you have your out of office on, It's like first line of defense. Then somebody can email you again and they won't get the out of office message.
Exactly. It just adds another element. But I think in Germany, for example, when you're taking 2-3 weeks off at a time to disconnect, you need to make sure that you've got a steady backup. So having a proxy that can not only answer emails for you, but can actually cover for you for a period of time is really important. It's an important part of your job, is making sure that your job can also function when you're not there. And that's you talked about cultural differences. That's considered a real positive when your role can be done by a proxy for a short period of time, when you're not there. Being indispensable is not considered a great thing. And I think that's something we take too back here. Being indispensable means that you have a risk.
Yeah, I mean, almost everything you're saying. From I just froze on the 3 weeks off.
That's nice.
I couldn't even fathom how I would fit that in.
Yeah,
but 3 weeks off, and it's expected, and you kind of have a proxy program. I feel like maybe this is just me, but if you feel like somebody else can do your job, you kind of feel inadequate.
Yeah.
Like I'm not.
That's an American mentality.
It's a very American mentality.
Yeah, that you make yourself so indispensable. And in reality, the cool thing, and I'll tell one more story, but my first 60 days, I had to clock in and clock out every day. I was on what they call a tariff associate.
Okay.
So you have a 40-hour contract. And of course my American mentality was first one in, last one out, hustling. And within about 60 days, my boss came to me and said, "Hey, you've compiled like 60 hours of overtime." And I kind of leaned back and said, "Yeah,
you're proud of it.
You know it.
I'm glad you noticed.
Getting ahead, burning the midnight oil, pushing it." And he said, and I'll remember this, "You want to impress me, get your job done in the 40 hours. That's impressive."
Oh, wow.
And that was a real moment to go, I'm not in Kansas. This is a completely different approach. It's about efficiency. It's about effectiveness. It's about getting more out of less. And this was I remember a moment for me. And I went home and told Jackie, my wife, about it. I said, "Okay, we're not in Kansas anymore. That's not just what
did it. It wasn't the German in a 4-hour meeting. It was that you can't work extra."
That was definitely a big part of it, because that was so much of our identity, was being, was the nights and the weekends and being the first one in and the last one out. It was such an important part of getting ahead.
And here you mentioned, first thing you do in the morning is check your phone. I imagine you're checking work emails, not sports scores. Yeah.
Yeah. So I check my sports too.
Yeah. Okay.
I got to.
Well, let's talk about sports in a little bit. But as you go through these experiences in Europe, the kind of mandatory time off, the scheduled work times, get your job done in the 40 hours, the setting up proxies, the no cell phones and computers in meetings.
Yeah, that has since gone now. Cell phones and computers, but definitely at the time, fair. This was the way it was.
But
it was all about being present, right?
How hard? So how long were you there?
4.5 years.
Okay, so I imagine you adapted to that kind of work style, right?
Yes.
Did you adapt to the taking 3 weeks off? And
I can't say that I ever took 3 weeks off, but we took a couple weeks off, and this was, unplugging and work-life balance. This was anybody who spends any amount of time over there will tell you that's one of the greatest takeaways, is the work-life balance piece. Mm-hmm. And so we definitely took advantage of it. When my youngest was born, I took a few weeks off and got to spend some time and disconnect for a while, and the world kept spinning, and the business still got done because you had a strong network of people that were in the organization ready to step in when you needed to step out. And I think that's something, frankly, they do a lot better than we do.
Yeah. And so I guess you kind of hit on it. I could talk to anyone who's worked in Europe and they'll probably tell me these details, but I don't often get the opportunity. I know a lot of people that listen to this won't have the opportunity to talk to somebody who now comes back to the U.S. and runs a business that had that time in Europe. And so I appreciate you allowing me to ask these questions, but how much of that did you bring back with you and kind of try to implement in the workflow of your business here?
Yeah, I think definitely when it comes to setting expectations and then trying to live by those same expectations around making family a priority, I've tried. I'm not always great at it, admittedly. I'm guilty as well of sending some emails on the weekends and at night. But I try to also be open about the fact that, and I have a line at the bottom of my signature that says something to the effect of, while I may be emailing you outside of normal business hours, I don't expect you to respond outside of your normal working hours.
Do you actually mean that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we all have those moments where we have an hour or two and it's on our brain and we think, hey, maybe it's just easier to get it done. And then I can let it go and then I can move on and with my personal part of it, right? So while I will send some emails and work here and there, it works for me. Mm-hmm. But I don't expect if I send an email on a Saturday that I get a response from somebody on a Saturday. And I think it's fair to say that, we'll all work with when it makes sense for us. Certainly, you want to hear back in a timely manner. And I think that's fair and that's, expected. But I think it's also understandable that some people work better during different times and they have to, they may have a couple hours in the evening when they didn't have them in the morning, and having some semblance of flexibility is, I think, an important part of staying balanced in your life. Your life isn't going to always be from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. You need to make sure you can also be flexible from time to time.
So that's interesting. So that's kind of like a hybrid approach to, the American culture, which, if we want to categorize, it's always on and always working, and the European culture, which was seeming, at least for your experience, it was a set number of hours, it was a set time period.
Definitely at the working level. I mean, then it gets a little bit cloudier when you get up into the senior levels. But I think for me, the lesson is more about, the work-life balance, and maybe it's then. I have no doubt that the work gets done, but it's also about being on versus being off.
So, what's work-life balance at Bosch today? Like, what does that mean? How did you bring that back and actually implement it? Just lead by example, or did you kind of coach your team into, hey, this is I'll make a specific example. Post-COVID, right?
Yep.
So there's the debate between hybrid work or work from home, and then there's the Spotify angle is. We allow our employees to work remotely because they're not children. They're as blunt as that. And then I talk to a lot of businesses that their philosophy is, if you're not in the office, you're no longer an employee here. So where is Bosch on this spectrum, or where are you at least as the new regional president?
I think where I am is where Bosch is, which is we have a hybrid approach today. Mm-hmm. We have a certain number of days in the office that we're targeting. We're targeting right now 3 days. Mm-hmm. But I think, bigger than that, whether you say it's 3 days in or 2 days in, I think it has less to do with what you mandate in terms of days in the office and more in the way that you manage your business, mm-hmm. in the way that you live. And, I for one, I'm on the road a lot. I'm on the road sometimes 3-4 days a week. I fly to Germany oftentimes on Saturdays and Sundays. So I miss lacrosse games and I miss Sunday dinners and I miss things like this. So on a Friday when I get home, I like being able to surprise my kid and pick him up from school. And if I have a meeting at that time, if I can take it from the car or I can push it by 30 minutes, or if I can, pull it ahead, whatever that may be, so that I can be present in that moment that maybe I wasn't expecting, but feels good. Mm-hmm. I personally appreciate that. I love that. And I love that I have the flexibility and the autonomy to do that. And I would think that my people would want the same, right? I mean, we oftentimes are asked to do things that we didn't plan for or expect, and we're asked to carve out time out of our personal time for work things. It just happens.
Yeah, of course.
And so then when someone says I need to carve out some personal time during a work event or a work day in order to do something that's important to me, that helps me be well-rounded, I think we need the flexibility to do it. I take it all the time, and I think it's an important part for me to be able to have that flexibility to show up when I can. And so I like to think that our people can do the same.
That's such a well presented perspective on that topic, and the kind of the converse to, we ask you to do work things during your personal time. We should also allow you to do personal things on your work time, as long as you get your job done. I think that's that's very well stated.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to ask that question. I'm still kind of stuck on the Europe stuff, you being an American in Europe, but also you're an American in a German company.
Yes.
Is it typical that the American business, the North American business of Bosch, is represented by an American? Is that kind of how that goes? Or
it hasn't been for the last couple of my predecessors.
Mm-hmm.
But it also, I don't think it's by design one way or another. Different times call for different leaders in roles. And the times before this called for a different set of skills, and that set of skills was in a different person who happened to be German.
Okay.
And we've had leaders who weren't even German, that just weren't American. So it's, I think ideally it's great when you've got somebody who's from the region that represents the region. And I'm sure that was part of the decision making when I took this role.
Mm-hmm.
Was it's good to have somebody who's from the region, who knows the customers and knows the market, and speaks the language, not just literally but figuratively. But I'm also, I don't get too hung up on this. Because I think also you may set some expectations that are independent of a cultural shift, right? If you get too hung up on where somebody's from or what language they speak, then you miss the opportunity to get what's best out of them. And it's not just about that. I think there's definitely, it's nice to have. I'm sure people like seeing, both our customers and our associates like seeing somebody in this role who's from here.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. But different times call for different leaders with different skill sets that are bringing different messages. And, I'm sure you can look back at my predecessors and say, there was a reason why we had somebody coming from Germany that had that mindset
Mm-hmm.
to help our business in the time that it needed. And it has more to do with the skills and the messaging than it does to me necessarily where that person's from.
That's a really cool phrase. Different times call for different leaders. Playing that back to you, what kind of leader are you in? What kind of time is Bosch in right now?
Yeah, we're in a growth mode here in North America. This is really clear. There's big expectations, not just on our mobility aftermarket group, but on the Bosch business mobility group as a whole, that we drive the growth for the world. And is it because there's great opportunity here? Yes. Is it also because other areas are slowing down? Yes.
Mm.
So you have to capitalize for both reasons. We can't necessarily depend on every other region for growth at this time. There's different things that are happening geopolitically that affect our ability to grow in different areas.
Yeah, of course.
You can look at Europe and there's some challenges there. You can look at Asia and some challenges there. And so I think both by necessity, but also by opportunity, there's reasons to be optimistic about growth here. So we have big ambitions for growth, not just in new technology, but also in some areas where we're looking to expand market share in existing technologies. You can look at it, everywhere from diagnostics and some of the sexy stuff about annual recurring revenue and over-the-air updates and things like this, all the way to tried and true products that got us here: filters, batteries, brakes, wipers, things that Bosch is very well known for.
So you, subscription products, that's not an automotive part, right? And I think that maybe ties into the fact that Bosch's name is Mobility Aftermarket.
Yes.
It's not automotive aftermarket.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I maybe you can tell me where that came from, but my recollection is I think I was at CES maybe 5 years ago, and I remember, it's a tech conference, but I remember the talking to somebody and them saying, "Oh, automotive is so old school. Mobility is the new phrase." And I'm more of kind of like a long-term thinker, and I don't like change my opinion on things immediately. I I like to like incorporate new information. But that shift seemed pretty dramatic. What does mobility mean to Bosch, and maybe where did that come from? And
Yeah, maybe at the risk of oversimplifying it, I think it had less to do with, is it automotive or is it mobility or is automotive passé? I think it has more to do with the fact that it's less about the mode of transportation and more about getting people from point A to point B.
okay,
So whether that's through car, truck, ride share, there's lots of different ways to get people from point A to point B and product from point A to point B. That focusing it just on automotive is a pretty narrow scope.
mm-hmm.
And so to me, it makes sense. It's again, I don't think there's any real magic behind it. It's a word.
Yeah.
But I think it's at least now opens up the field of play to something other than just fixing cars on the road. It opens it up to how are we helping support people get from school to work, from point A to point B,
Mm-hmm.
and the products and the services that make it possible.
Do you work on your own car?
I don't.
Do you have a car?
I would love. Yes. Thank you. I have a car.
Okay.
But
a lot of people in cities don't have cars.
No, it's a good question. I would love to say that I work on cars. I don't.
Yeah.
It's not. I have passion for our product. I have passion for our people and our processes. It doesn't bring me a lot of joy to work on a car on the weekend. It's just not my bag.
It's not like a mandatory feature of.
I hope not, because if it is, I'm in trouble.
Yeah. I appreciate that, because I remember being at an investor conference, and I was going to speak at the conference, and I was talking to another person who was going to speak after me, and we both connected about living in a city, and you just kind of dribbled off, the side of the conversation that we do use rideshare a lot. One of us was either getting rid of our car or didn't have a car, and it works in a city. And somebody overheard us talking, and they said, listen, you two will not be taken seriously in this industry unless you talk about car ownership and repairing your own car, like get some grease under your fingernails. And
that's old school.
In the moment, I was taken aback, and I was like, does anybody have grease? I'm going to go dip my fingers in some grease right now. But yeah, so you don't really ascribe to that line of thinking, right?
No, I don't think you can. Again, hey, I've got a lot of people on my team who have, 2 or 3 cars parked in their driveway, and they're working on something constantly, and that's awesome. And certainly if and there's a lot of people that, turned their hobbies into a career, right? They, I have salespeople who love working on cars, and so they thought maybe I'll sell car parts. I mean, if you can combine your hobby and your career together in one, that's fantastic. For me, that was never a thing.
What are some of your hobbies?
I love to ski.
Okay.
I'm never happier than when I'm skiing. And I taught skiing for a hot minute on the East Coast when I first got out of college. And talk about, your hobbies and then into your career. But I also realized very quickly that I wasn't going to be happy just teaching skiing for the rest of my life. And so I did it for a little bit and had a lot of fun. And then I'm happy to have that be a hobby, and then happy to have my work be my work.
Okay.
Yeah, I like to ski. I like to play guitar.
Were you in a band?
Not a band per se. I have played with friends and in circles, and my dad plays and he taught me to play, and my son plays, and he does the School of Rock, which is kind of this hybrid. Learn to play guitar, but also learn to perform. I wish I had done that, because I never really learned how to be in a band. But
no performances or anything like that.
Yeah, we've played in some bars before, but mostly it's for me and for my friends. I like to sit in the backyard or by the fire and play songs and get people to sing along. And this, I mean, that's.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
To me, that's like way more nerve wracking than being up in front of a bunch of strangers.
Oh, really?
Like getting up in front of people that know you really well. And you're like, oh, hey, by the way, I'm going to go stand behind this microphone and I'm going to play some music for you, because they're the people who can tell you suck. Stop.
Isn't that funny? Because that doesn't worry me.
Not at all.
Not at all. No, I mean, the friends are. I mean, what's the worst they can do is stop listening.
They can look at their phones.
Yeah, and look at their phones.
Yeah.
No, I think no, this was always we used to play with my dad and his friends. They played, and so it was kind of a thing that we just always did. It was not anything, outright, it had more to do with getting together with people that you liked, and doing something that brought everybody a little bit of joy and have fun. And it was never anything more than that. It was never, pressure to perform or to do. It was just something you did on the weekends for fun.
But did you have comfort kind of like getting up in front of a microphone and playing in front of people your whole life?
Yes.
Did that help you in your career, kind of raising your hand and saying, I will do the thing?
Yeah. Yeah. I've never had a problem, or a fear of getting up and being in front of people. I sought it out more often than not.
No.
Whether that be doing a little bit of theater when I was younger, or running for student Congress, doing those things, it's always been something that I've been comfortable with and that I've enjoyed. I enjoyed the preparation. I enjoyed doing it. So it definitely helps, though. I think especially early in your career when it's hard to differentiate yourself from other people. Everybody's young, everybody's ambitious, everybody's wanting to go, everyone's wanting to succeed. But I think that willingness to get up in front of people and be a little bit vulnerable, and just raise your hand and say, I'm willing to give it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
That equated very well to business, because so much of it is just being willing to raise your hand and be the first one that goes to the board and says, I've got an idea.
Did you just enjoy doing that? Like, I'll be the one that stands up and sings to everyone. So you did that at work, or did somebody kind of coach you into that?
No, that was, I think, like it or not, I haven't met a microphone I don't like. So nobody needs to coach me to get up and say something. But I mean, you need to also, though, be coached about when you do get up, that the words that you say are impactful and that they mean something. Mm-hmm. Simply getting up and dancing around the room is not gonna do it. You need to be thoughtful and respectful of people's time.
What about mentors growing up?
Yeah, I mean, early mentors were definitely my parents. They both worked. They both worked full time, which isn't always the case. So this was just something we had, and my parents worked full days and came home, and then we had our time in the evenings. And in terms of especially early in my career, I called on my mom a lot for advice. Yeah. She was a nurse, and worked midnights, and then worked her way up through the organization into a C-suite role as a chief operating officer for a major first a healthcare company and then a hospital in Pontiac, Michigan. And she always has had a very cool way with people, leading with kindness and empathy. And that was always something that spoke to me much more than leading with an edge and a hard push.
Okay.
So I saw that being successful, and I also just feels a lot more natural to me. So whenever there were topics about how to deal with people and tough circumstances, and
which is all of work, which
is everything. Yeah. But dealing with expectations, and especially when emotions get involved, she has been and continues to be a big resource. When there's anything creative in nature, I would go to my dad. My dad is the creative guru. Everything from music and costume and things like this that he was always very passionate about. And so when there's something where I need to channel my creativity and do something that nobody's ever done before, then I would call on him from time to time. So they were very, very important parts, especially watching them raise us while working at the same time. You start to look for how did they do it and how would I do it, and that was a big part.
Do you remember any specific advice or anything that just sticks with you on a daily basis, or in a lot of situations that maybe your mom or dad told you, that you can look back on and say, gosh, I will never forget that. And I still do that to this day.
I'll give you maybe one personal and one professional. On the professional side, my mom was always very big to say, never underestimate the power of being the first person to raise your hand and go up to the board with an idea. And I mentioned that a little bit earlier, that especially when you look at leaders and they're bringing out a tough topic and they're not sure how it's going to land, they appreciate those people who say, hey, okay, I'm going to take it. I'm going to take a shot. I'm going to walk up and I'm going to start to be one of the first people who starts to contribute to your vision. Even if it's a little amount, even if it's a little bit misguided, never underestimate the power of being the first person to raise your hand and get up there and do that.
Wow, it's so
that was
true.
really, really important.
Yeah.
And that's something, I mean, every day I think about that.
I'm going to use that one.
It's easy to lean back and think of 3 or 4 reasons why what this person's saying won't work, or why they don't understand, or why they should have a different perspective. But being one of the first people to raise your hand and say, I'm willing to give it a shot, even though it's going to be imperfect, what I propose, but it gets the ball rolling. This is separating yourself very quickly with very little, frankly, very little effort. And you don't need to be the smartest person in the room or have the most experience or be the oldest or the youngest to raise your hand first and say, I'm willing to give it a shot.
So this is key. This is key advice that you got earlier, right?
Very early.
Yeah.
Very early. I mean, and I still use this all the time. I mean, and I tell my people the same thing. Hey, be quick to start working on solutions, and it's only getting tougher. I mean, it's, we're being asked to do more with less. We're trying to put more digitalization and automation in. So the playbook that we use to get to this point, this is out the window.
Yeah.
I mean, we're focusing on exponential growth, utilizing, less resources with more focus on automation and digitalization. So simply saying, well, we're going to do what we did before isn't going to work. So these creative new ideas of how we're going to get there, you have to really encourage those. So yes, it was an important part of growing and developing and getting opportunities. But it's also an important part of going, of taking our business now to the next level. So it's both.
How do you coach that? How do you coach, you're going to be probably in your role, the person at the front. How do you tell people, somebody raise your hand? Like, how does that work? How do you encourage people to, or do you just kind of, in moments where it shows up, you encourage leaders to encourage their teams to offer people to raise their hands?
I think, you certainly encourage your leaders to encourage their teams. And I mean, this to me is kind of a no-brainer, but I think you also find change agents in your company, that people that you notice that are pretty quick to do that. And if they're not volunteering right away, I try to find a quiet moment and say, hey, we rolled this out. You heard about it. It's a really important part of our business. I see you being a real contributor. If you could do A, B, and C and help us get there. And very quickly, you'll find the level of engagement is there. They're already there. They're change agents within the company. The
gap is psychological safety.
There might be some psychological safety involved to say, hey, give it a shot. Don't worry. I've got your back. And that's an important part. Don't underestimate that.
That's actually the way you do that. Telling somebody, I see you being a really important part of this, or a critical part of this, this change. That's definitely a better way to go about it than what I do, which is like, I really encourage people to share what's on their mind, share their thought, with no commitment to it being used or, anyone listening to it, and it's not constructive. It's a very not constructive way. But what I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to address the fear of somebody sharing an idea, because in general, I think the reason they're not sharing is because they're afraid their idea is not going to get used, or they're going to be told it's a stupid idea or something like that. And I would say, listen, you're absolved of all of that. Just say what you're thinking, and we may or may not use it, right? But I really like your approach, which is you kind of tell somebody, we need you in this.
Yeah. But I think you can do both. I hear what you're saying. I think you can do both. I think it's okay to say, hey, let's spitball this. Let's start throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks. And if you can get there with that approach, it's probably faster. But especially difficult topics, when you need to maybe pull it out of somebody or pull it out of the organization. you've got to find different avenues. You may not get it where you say, hey, there's 50 people in the room. Raise your hand if you've got an idea how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
So instead, you may need to find 3 or 4 people and then maybe do it in a smaller group, or even then do it individually and say, hey, we need you here. And people have done that to me before, with things that maybe on the surface didn't seem so exciting or sexy, or maybe even a little bit dangerous in terms of what will happen if this isn't successful.
Yeah.
But if you have somebody that you trust that sits down with you and says, hey, we need you for this. This is why we think you could really contribute. Are you willing to give it a shot? 9 times out of 10, that's all people need.
I just saw you kind of like being a leader in your role to me in that conversation.
Yeah. You ready to go?
I'm ready. I'm pumped. Throw me in.
You're stoked?
Yeah, I have ideas.
Good.
I'm going to raise my hand. But when you think you seem to enjoy being a leader?
Yes. I love it.
Like when you think of being a leader, what is it? What comes to mind? Like, what are the responsibilities of being a leader that you love? If you say you love it.
Yeah. I love being a resource for people. So first and foremost, I like being a resource. So, when you're stuck and you need some support on how to get around or how to find creative solutions, I like being a resource.
Which is, to be fair, not the first thing people think of as a leader.
No,
right?
and that's the funny part is, as I'm saying that, I go, yeah, but on the same token, you have to be a shot caller. And so you also have to enjoy calling shots.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can let the solution bubble up organically and it'll get to where it needs to go. And sometimes you've got to be the shot caller and say, hey, this is how we're going to do it. And this is why we're going to do it. And we're going to move ahead. And this is the direction. Ready, set, go.
Oh.
So you've got to dig it from both sides.
Enjoy making the decisions.
Yeah. You've got to do both. I mean, again, I've seen it work in both ways, where you've got people who just let it bubble and then are satisfied with the end result. And I've seen leaders who start from the top and say, we're going to do it this way. And that's the way it's going to go, whether you like it or not. And if you're on board, great. If not, get out of the way. For me, neither of those are really my style. I like to take it a little bit both ways to say, hey, let's get creative solutions together. But at the end of the day, we also need a strong voice that says, okay, we've got our options. This is the direction we're going. And this is why it's important that we do it. And now why we execute on it. Because at the end of the day, you're responsible. No one's going to go to your people and say, why didn't it work? People are going to go to you and say, what happened? Why didn't it work? And what are you doing to fix it? Not what is your team doing, but what are you personally doing? And that accountability, I think, is something that if you take it too literally, you'll end up charging into something without any input. And if you don't take it literally enough, you'll end up crowdsourcing everything and it won't be yours. You won't own it. So you've got to have that middle ground where you own it, but you're also taking advantage of the different personalities and ideas and concepts that are coming from a huge organization.
Yeah. You got to like sitting in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
See what I did there?
That was beautiful.
Because this show is called The Driver's Seat.
Is that what you did?
That was really funny. Did anyone
It was
get
nice.
that joke?
I didn't hear anybody laugh though.
Okay. Yeah.
It's all right. We can try funny later.
I'm somewhat of a leader in my own organization, and I think you're supposed to be the person that gets laughs, even when you're not funny. I don't know where people get that impression. I don't know what they do to get those laughs. I have just not found that gear. I
love humor. I love it. But I love self-deprecating humor too. So I think if you can't make fun of
I try to actually be funny, and it doesn't work.
I think if you can't laugh at yourself, and people who know me know this, and my family knows this, I'm the first one to make fun of myself.
What are some of your go-tos? Like, what do you pick on yourself for?
Oh, everything. I mean, everything. Mistakes you make day in and day out. Assumptions you make that go wrong. You name it, and it's not off limits for me. Which is funny because it doesn't always. There are certain people who go, "Gosh, why would you make fun of yourself?" Self-deprecation just. But I'm a firm believer. First, I like to laugh and I like to have fun. Yeah. I love humor. And I like to have fun at work. There was one of the first bosses I had coming in. That was one of his opening lines was, I like to have fun at work. And I kind of went, that's an interesting thing to say. And this was very early in my career, but I realized very quickly, hey, you can still have humor. You can still laugh. You can still be serious. and still be focused on a job while keeping things relatively light.
Was all this true in Germany?
Not as much. I mean, I think there's maybe a little bit more of a separation between who you are at work and who you are at home. I think that's just part of the culture.
Yeah.
And which is fine, and it works for people. Certain people don't like to blend those worlds, and that's fine. That's totally fine. But for me, there's a certain amount of authenticity that comes with not pretending I'm somebody else when I'm at work than I am when I'm at home. So I it's not totally blended. It can't be, because otherwise you'll start to lose sight of what are your real priorities in each space. But I think I think by adding some element of who you are in both places, you create the best of both worlds. And
yeah, picking up on that, Ted Hughes, he runs AWA.
Yeah, I love Ted. He's awesome.
I'd never met you before this, and I was thinking about people that know you, and I was like, Ted has to know this guy. And I texted Ted, and he was like, "Oh, I know Todd," and he just sent me a bunch of pictures in you in a Lions jersey.
Oh yeah,
and he was like, he's probably going to show up to this thing in a Lions jersey. Speaking of bringing, a little bit of your personal.
Man, I should have. That would have been a good idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like you're super passionate about the Lions. Any other sports teams?
Yeah, I'm a Detroit kid.
You're from Detroit
through and through. From Detroit area, suburbs of Detroit. Lived there my whole life, and then went to Michigan State University. So Michigan kid as well. So I'm very proud.
Michigan State fan.
Michigan State fan. Yes, very clear that we're clear about Michigan State.
Got it.
Fan.
Okay.
But I've been a Michigan kid from the beginning, and I'm very proud to be from there. And so I've held on to that, even though, moving to the East Coast for a minute, and then, abroad for a while, then in and out of Chicago. We lived 10 years in Chicago after college. So I've spent, frankly, almost as much time living in and around Chicago as I have Detroit. But no, I'm big on that. It's part of the identity that I have. I love the whole idea of the grit and the determination, and in the city that really struggled for a very long period of time, that had its heyday, 50 years ago, and then went through this really, really dark time, and then this now transformation and renaissance into what it is today. And then sports is just a microcosm of it that comes with it, right? It's that recovery and that redemption, and that now that exciting part of saying, hey, I was part of it and I was a fan before. Also is really cool to me, that loyalty, of saying, hey, I was there also when things were tough, and I rode through it and saw it go and return to something that's cool. But yeah, for better or worse, I've been a Lions fan for a very, very long time.
But that's a really interesting word you just used, which is loyalty. I don't think many people would pick up on it, but I don't know why when it hits my ears, it kind of rattles around my brain. I don't know what to do with the word. And if I quickly apply it to you and your career, whatever I've learned in you in the last, I guess, hour we've been talking. You've been at Bosch for how many years?
19
years. You've been a Lions fan for how many
45 years?
45 years. And Michigan State fan.
Yeah,
probably
big
right
time.
after
My parents both went there.
Like, you're not a football fan. You're a Michigan State and a Lions fan, right? You can't just watch somebody beat on the Lions. You're like, oh, they're really good at football.
No.
Right.
No.
But then you applied the word loyalty to that. Maybe I can describe it, and I don't know why I have a hard time with that word, because it seems like.
Are you thinking of blind loyalty?
Maybe. And maybe you can help me understand what I'm thinking of here. But sometimes loyalty is especially when it comes to football teams, weren't the Rams at some point like the St. Louis Rams, and then now they're like the LA Rams, or maybe it's vice versa. I'm not sure. But if you're a community and you're really, really into that team, you're super loyal, then they just get up and move.
Yeah.
I always
feel betrayed.
Hey, you feel betrayed because loyalty kind of comes off as and it might be blind loyalty, but like a one-way proposition. Somebody wants you to be loyal to them, and then they have the right to kind of change their minds on you whenever you want. It seems like, do you hear that at all?
Yeah, I get it. I get it. I think it has more to do, frankly, with how it serves you than it does what you're getting in return. So if you think about loyalty from the standpoint of, well, what am I getting in return for this? Then 9 times out of 10, you're going to be let down. I think if you think about, how does my loyalty serve me? My loyalty serve me. And this is a very basic example, but frankly, whether the Lions win or lose, I get an opportunity to have some friends over, barbecue, have a couple beers, have some fun, and coming together with people who have similar passion, regardless of what happens at the end of the day. So yeah, you can be mad whether they win or lose.
Oh, that's so
but
interesting.
if you utilize that loyalty to serve you and not necessarily waiting for something in return and say, man, they really let me down.
Oh,
I mean, you've got to know right off the bat that you can't guarantee that whoever or whatever you're loyal to isn't going to let you down at some point. They will. It's humans, it's organizations, it's everything. But it doesn't mean that you can't believe in it. It doesn't mean that you can't use it to still serve you, right? And I think it's, to your point, right? It shouldn't be a one-way street. It should be a two-way street, but there will be times when it's a one-way street, and you got to be cool with that. And there's also a time when you may not be delivering on your commitment, but they are.
That's interesting. You just kind of spelled out loyalty is almost like camaraderie. It's like you surround yourself with other people who kind of share your loyalty, and you're loyal to one another. For a period of time. Yeah, for a period of time.
It doesn't have to be forever.
So that could be, you and your Lions fan friends, and you're all in it together. And maybe the same thing at Bosch, right? Everyone's kind of committed. They're behind the same mission. That's helpful for me.
I love how we got here through the Lions of all things.
Well, we got it through Ted Hughes, and
that's true.
I was looking for insightful.
Ted's an awesome Lions
you,
fan.
and I just got 5 pictures of you in a Lions jersey.
Oh yeah, isn't that funny that you asked for insight and he sends pictures of me in a Lions jersey?
But it was a lot of insight, I guess. Yeah. I was like, okay.
Well, the funny part about that was the game that we were at. I took my predecessor, Andreas Andorfer, had never been to a game, and then we took one of our customers who are fantastic Lions fans as well, and then it just so happened that Ted asked me, "Hey, are you going to the game?" I said, "Actually, I am going." He said, "Well, meet us beforehand at my tailgate spot." So we met there. So here we've got some customers who are fans, Ted, who's Ted and running his organization, and then Andreas, who had never been to a game before. And here's a picture of all of us wearing Lions jerseys in some random parking lot in Detroit. So, hey, talk about things bringing people together.
Yeah,
I mean,
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to try to jog your memory and go back. When we were talking about your parents giving you mentorship or guidance, you said personal and one personal, one professional. Yeah. And you brought up your mom, the kind of raising your hand thing. What was that, the personal or the professional one?
That was the professional one.
Okay, what was the personal one? Do you remember?
Yeah. So on a personal standpoint, and a very basic one, but always rings well with me, which is if you want a good marriage, surround yourself with other people that have good marriages.
And that came from
That came from my dad.
Okay.
So, and that again seems very basic, right? Mm-hmm. Now, why would that be important? Because you emulate what you see around you. And marriages are tough. I mean, they're difficult. You've got a lot of different things at play. You've got kids, you've got careers, you've got extended family, you've got all those things. And if you surround yourself with people that emulate what you want to be and what you want to do, inherently it will rub off on you.
I love that advice. That's a much more wholesome perspective than the way I've heard it, which is if you want to be smart, surround yourself with 5 people smarter than you. Be the dumbest person in your friend group. If you want to be rich, surround yourself with billionaires. You're going to be a billionaire. If you surround yourself with like people who are doing things that are non-productive, you're going to be non-productive. So I think that's along the same lines. But the marriage angle is pretty good.
Yeah, it's
pretty
a good
good
one.
Advice. Yeah,
it is a good one.
You've been married for a long time, right?
Yeah. We've been married since 2007. You're going to have to do the math.
How old were you when you got married?
18 years.
When did you meet your wife?
We met when we were young. We met when we were somewhere between 8th grade and freshman year. So I think we were 13, 14.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
I don't know why that's so shocking.
Yeah, and we were friends, but we were friends for a really long time.
Yeah.
So we didn't start dating until we were 19. in college, and then we dated for a long time after that. But we were really good friends. More importantly, kind of through high school and in the same friend groups, and then just kind of found ourselves on the same plane come college, and went from there. So, but we were really friends. We were friends first, and then we dated for a fair amount of time afterwards, and then got married. So, there's a lot of experience there too, and I think it helps when you're friends first.
You know yourselves through and through.
Yeah.
I mean, there are no secrets in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, that's super hard to do. I think that when I reflect on my life, and I just, I have a lot of cousins, and I pay attention to their lives. How many cousins do you have?
Oh, we have a lot.
You have a big family.
Yeah, 14, 15 cousins.
I think it shows up the most in relationships, how much people change in their lives and in blocks, right? So when you go from high school up to high school where, you've never left your town, right? And now you can go to college. A lot of people leave their town to go to college, and you're on your own for your first time. That's usually a change in a personality, a change in a person, and maybe like that would result in a change of relationship. You become a different person after that experience when you're on your own. Same thing happens when you then leave college and you go into the work world. You go into the work world for the first few years. You just kind of develop into a person that you were not for the, whatever it is, 18 years prior.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
But then you might be like, living with a couple of friends, sharing a flat or something like that.
You're describing my 20s.
Yeah. Well, yours and mine.
Yeah.
So, but then after that, maybe you go live on your own and you develop into your own person. At each one of those kind of checkpoints in life, it's not a guarantee that the people around you change with you.
Yes.
Like it's actually more common than not.
It's more common than not that you're going to find more differences.
People just evolve in different directions. And I think this shows up a lot in relationships. And again, just through my own personal observations, that people they become completely different people because they don't know who you are at whatever, 8th grade, right? You don't know who you are at the end of college. And I don't know who I am today, but like basically I will keep changing. The people in my life will keep changing. Do you find that true? I mean, was it hard to kind of keep connected to all your friends and keep connected to your wife? Or did you, any advice around that area?
That's tough because I when I was talking about my career earlier and I thought about kind of the time before Germany, during Germany, and after Germany, I almost think kind of about my personal life in a very same way, right? There was high school, there was college, and then there was post-college. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to keep connections through years and moves and all of this. I think one of the luxuries, at least, from guys, and I think this is you cannot talk to one of your buddies for a year and a half, and then you end up together for some reason, and it's like nothing ever changed.
You described me and all my relationships.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's great.
Yeah.
And the nice thing too about now technology is you get a group chat going with a couple of buddies, and you just kind of keep stoking that flame every once in a while just to keep those connections burning. So I think, from that standpoint, I'm not great about going and visiting people. I'm not great. I mean, even when I'm back in Germany, I've got friends in Germany that we left. I'm not great about going and visiting and knocking on people's doors and saying, I'm here. I wish I was better. I'm not. But I also try to at least maintain some connection, so that, we can, when we do come together, when we do have the opportunity to come together, at worst, you can recreate some of the old memories. At best, you can create some new ones.
It's funny. You just said, I wish I was better, but I'm not at visiting people. Maybe this is kind of part and parcel with your self-deprecating humor, but you said that about using your cell phone, said that about like working out in the morning, and how much you dwell on, I mean, maybe that's where the self-deprecating humor comes from, but how much you dwell on like, be better, Todd, be better,
more than I should.
Yeah.
Definitely.
You just did it again also.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah. I think a lot of people are their own worst critics, and you need somebody to remind you, hey, if you were as kind to yourself as you are to everybody else, chances are you would be you wouldn't be saying these things to yourself. So
That's
I think
so true.
there's a certain element there that I've definitely gotten better at, because you can't also be in roles like this or have impact on an organization like this and dwell. You just can't. You won't be successful. You won't be productive. It'll resonate with the people that you're with, that you dwell on mistakes and you don't necessarily build on successes. So I think by nature, it's something we all do to a certain extent, but that's one area where I'm trying to get better, is not necessarily being such a harsh critic all the time of myself.
Well, I'll just tell you why that stuck out to me is because sitting as the person across from you.
Yep.
And I learned this from just my relationship with my brother. We're just very different. He's high energy, just, probably I ask questions. He probably talks first, and I just used to disagree with the way he kind of goes about, just every day. But he's incredibly successful. And that kind of experience with him made me realize, like, he is successful because of who he is. He's successful in his marriage, he's successful in his life. And so when you say these, like, I should be better, my reaction to that is, well, you are who you are and where you are because of all the things that you may or may not be good at.
Yeah. Yep.
So I don't know if that's just, I'm not trying to be kind to you through that, but it's just letting you know what the observer sees is if you were better or different at any one of those things, you wouldn't be who you are.
No, I think it's, and I think that's good feedback to give and get, because it reminds us to what we said earlier, not to dwell on shortcomings or, being well-rounded. And this is interesting because, it used to be all about rounding out your personality, rounding out your business acumen, rounding out so that you can be this complete person or this complete commodity. And now it's more about, hey, don't focus so much on closing those gaps. Surround yourself with people who can. So, if you're a friend who's the funny one, be the funny one. You don't also have to be the one who's the most thoughtful one at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think there's a certain element of that in business too, where it certainly helps to try to cover your gaps where you can. But at the same time, if you spend all your time trying to close your gaps, you won't be the person that got you to where you are based on your strengths.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a balance there, and I think in general, all any of us can do is play to our strengths.
Yeah. I mean, I say all that, not being very kind to myself. So
yeah.
When you talked about kind of the rounding out of people, there's just switching gears a little bit. There's another conversation kind of going on, which is, how important is college and how necessary is a degree when going into a professional career, or should you just hop in, maybe the trade, kind of going to trade school, or just getting experience either through internship or just employment right away and building that first. Do you have a perspective on that? Where do you come out on that? And maybe, does Bosch still have any requirements?
Yeah. I mean, I think, my perspective, I think, is maybe independent of Bosch, but, I think there's a path for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it is absolutely critical to have certain degrees with certain qualifications to find something that you're good at, that you believe in, and that you're going to contribute at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
Do certain roles have certain requirements? Yes. Are we going to change those over time? I don't know. But I am a strong believer in vocational training, and I think that there are other avenues besides everybody coming out with the same degree and saying, okay, here I am, here's my piece of paper, now what do I do? And I think if you do that, you also discredit a lot of people who are chasing their passion, which may not be something that you get in a 4-year degree.
Mm-hmm.
It may be something that you learn on the job. It may be something you learn in trade school, through a mentorship, through a family member. These second, third, fourth, fifth generation family owned companies doesn't necessarily always have a path that goes to an undergrad and an MBA. So if you
but
limit
they're very
it,
successful.
yeah, but incredibly successful,
Yeah.
and great leaders and people who contribute not just, to their own organizations, but in some cases, entire towns, right, are employed by some of these companies. So it's, selfishly, I went that route. It worked for me.
Yeah.
But does it work for everybody? No. And I think, I hope that there's still a place in our economy and in our country for people who chase their passions and trades.
Yeah. And I totally agree. And I try to look for the differences in people and play up their strengths, rather than look for the homogenous kind of crude.
But that's a new way of thinking, right?
I think so too. I was going to ask that, but I don't know if I wanted to put you on the spot like that. But it does feel different.
It does feel different
than what we were maybe raised with.
Absolutely.
We're roughly the same age, by the way.
Yeah, there we go. It's I think it used to be very much about, even when you look at the performance review process, was all about, what are your gaps and how are you closing them? What are your gaps and how are you closing them? And we shifted completely our performance review process to be more focused on, what are your strengths and how do we capitalize on them?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is new, and it even takes some time. I mean, I was in favor of it, and I did a couple of them, and even then I was kind of like, yeah, but shouldn't we talk about?
Yeah, what do I need to fix?
About some of those? Yeah, there's got to be some things that I should fix. And,
right.
And it's more now about, hey, how do we get the absolute best out of you, utilizing the strengths that you have, and we'll close the gaps somewhere else. And this is a new way of thinking. It's not, maybe it's not revolutionary. People probably maybe been doing it for years in other organizations or other industries. But at least for me and for us, it was a new way of looking and saying, hey, let's not waste time focusing on gaps of individuals. Let's figure out where we can get their strengths, and where we can leverage those strengths to realize gains. And it's very simple. And it's easy to say. It's a little bit harder to do.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it sounds great.
Sounds great. Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah.
Trying to think of my strengths.
Ask in 5 years when we do it.
I'm not doing great right now. In the moment, just trying to think of my strengths. I got a lot of flaws.
Yeah, it's ingrained in us.
Yeah.
And so you again, ask me in 5 years how we're doing, because it'll go from now, theory to practice. But I would hope, if I think about it, I would hope that people would do the same for me, that they would look and say, hey, here are the things you're bringing to the table that are really positive, and let's focus on that, and let's get more of that. And if there's something outward that we say, hey, this is getting in the way of your success, then let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. If it's getting in the way, but if it's just a question of, hey, here's one area that isn't my forte, let's not waste any more time than we have to on it. Let's put it aside. Let's find a way to Band-Aid that through another area and focus on how we get more of what's great.
You said, ask me that in 5 years.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you two branches of questions in 5 years, and I appreciate you giving me so much time today. First is, Bosch is a key player in the automotive industry and in the automotive aftermarket. Where do you see the auto industry going, mobility, transportation, and then maybe Bosch within there? I know it's a loaded question, but I'm trying to create the mosaic of, the transportation mobility economy, and then maybe you can layer in where Bosch is in that in the next 5 years, 7 years, however you think about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you can look at what got us here, and you can look at where you want to go. And, to say we know what's going to happen next is probably easier said than done.
Sure.
And you don't have to look too far than the last 3, 4, 5 years and some of the pivots we've seen with EV and to a certain extent autonomous and things like this. So, despite the fact that a lot of companies went all in on it, right? I think if you look at it and you separate it into what got you here and where you want to go, there is a large part of our business, especially around business mobility, is predicated on the technology that's on the road today. Mm-hmm. And that technology is not changing, especially in the mobility aftermarket.
Specifically on the aftermarket side.
On the aftermarket side, right? So this is not going anywhere. We need to be ready and willing and able to provide solutions and creative solutions too, because it will get harder to get product. It'll get harder to to make affordable solutions over time. So you really have to focus on this. You have to keep investing in this.
You made me refine my question a little bit. So the aftermarket builds parts not just for cars on the road, but kind of for when cars start to collect on the road, when we know how many cars have been sold.
The sweet spot.
After a few years, you realize what the populations of vehicles are on the road after a few years of being sold. Then we start to invest in the tooling and equipment to make the parts for those cars. If I can put you in the position of trying to think about what technologies are you taking seriously today that might be in cars, in the next sweet spot, right? Like, is it lithium ion batteries? Is it hydrogen? Is it LiDAR and, those kinds of sensors? At least because Bosch has a lens on both sides, right? So what do you think of as the technologies that we should take seriously?
Yeah. So, the simple answer is that Bosch is powertrain agnostic, right? So no matter what the technology is, we're chasing it to a certain extent. But I think that if you look at the development of EV over time, this is an area where we need to be. If you look at the development of ADAS, and all the way up to autonomous, this is someplace where we need to be and where we're playing today.
Got it.
So, those are two probably pretty quick ones that hit in terms of what's different from what we're doing today, where we say, hey, we have to continue to invest and we've got to continue to explore and develop new technologies, and especially around the ADAS piece, because if you look at the technology and the components that are related to ADAS, they're growing, they're going into more vehicles. It's not just about premium vehicles anymore. It's all vehicles are equipped with this. And so it went, from being kind of an option to the standard equipment that we need to have long-term sustainable solutions for. And if you look at, electronic components in general, it's very hard to have a long-term play on electronic components and say, yeah, no worries. We'll be there in 15 years with exactly that product ready to go, because the rest of the industry is all about shifting and changing to the next technology. But we have to have technology and product on the road for vehicles 10, 15, sometimes even 20 years after the vehicle is out of series production. So I think it's an opportunity in the fact that we play in it already in the OE space, and that we can carry over those solutions to the aftermarket. This is an area for me that I say, okay, this is a no-brainer. This is a winner.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the calibration of that technology and the business there,
right,
that's going to happen.
The tools necessary,
tools and equipment, and we talked about over-the-air diagnostics and things like this. This is the sexy stuff.
Yeah.
This is the stuff that's fun to talk about. But it doesn't relieve us of both our obligation as well as our strong desire to continue to serve the vehicles that are in the car park today.
Yeah.
And that was really important to our customers to hear this, that we have a full commitment in continuing to do that. And I think
interesting, because you could be at risk of thinking of the future.
I get that question more often than I get, where's Bosch playing? It's, are you still committed? Are you guys still committed to, or are you putting all your eggs in a basket and now I'm going to have trouble finding a partner? So, that question to me comes up more often than the one about, tell me what's new. It's just as much, hey, how are you going to continue to make sure that you've got solutions for existing? Because Bosch has thought of, and we're a technology company, and we're getting more into software, right? So it's the stuff that you hear about sometimes is oftentimes lends itself more to the new technology and not necessarily the legacy technology, but we play in both. And so we have to take a real 360 view, or at least a 180 view of where we are and where we're going there, to make sure that we don't take our eyes off what got us here and not just, where we're looking to go.
Yeah, no, that's what an answer. I didn't expect to hear Bosch was a technology company, or, over the air, or, software, words like that are just typically not brake rotors and fuel injectors and stuff like that, and wiper blades. So thank you for that. I promised you a second question around kind of the 5-year branch, and this one might be a little bit more than 5 years, but we started this conversation referencing Tina Hubbard's learn it, earn it, return it philosophy. So we're in the earn it phase right now. stepped into this role 2 months ago. Yeah, you're very bullish about Bosch's prospects. You're really excited about the growth. You said you're in growth mode. If I talk to somebody who worked for you in this time period, and let's put it 5 years is probably too soon for you to be in your return it mode. I call it 10 or 15 years from now, where you're, clearly in your, this was successful, I want to give back and teach a little bit mode. What do you hope somebody tells me about the time that they worked with you? What do you hope that, the impression you leave on people is?
Mm-hmm. I would hope that people would say that I did what I said I was going to do, first and foremost, whether it was popular or unpopular or easy or difficult. And I would hope that people say that I led with compassion. To me, this is an important part of the experience. I had the luxury of working for somebody recently who reinforced to me that you can be both successful, ambitious, and lead with empathy, which I think isn't always the case. They don't mold all three of those together. Usually it's, hey, we're either ambitious and strong and tough, or you're empathetic and you're kind. But I think you can do both. And I hope that people say that we live that here. And that we did, and that we still achieved our targets while treating people well. And there's ways to get places faster without that, but it won't be as much fun, and it won't build the type of success that's long term. You can squeeze things out of people real quickly, but whether or not you can get more in the future and have them contribute beyond what they're doing today, you can't do unless you really take care of the entire person and their entire journey.
That's such a great answer. Do you feel like you're emulating any one mentor individually, or is this kind of a uniquely Todd perspective from a collection of different experiences and people?
I would say it's more of a collection. Yeah. I said earlier, there's different leaders for different times of your business.
Yeah.
So I've been in roles where we've been in growth mode. I've been in roles where we've had to make significant organizational changes, where we're in reorg. I've been in, we've gone through some recessions. We've gone through a variety of different economic challenges that we faced, and you've got to look at the different leaders and what they're bringing to the table. I mentioned that, more recently I saw, what leading with empathy and kindness brings. Mm-hmm. I've seen, previously through other leaders, times when you've got to be really tough and unyielding in your approach and not compromise when it comes to, hey, we have to take a tough decision now, even though it's not going to feel great.
Yeah.
And I've seen it where, it's less about what's happening in the organization and more about how do you develop yourself. So, it's definitely a collection. Like I said, I've been very lucky. Anybody who gets to a role like this usually has worked for some pretty awesome people.
That's well put.
I don't think you'll find people who have been really successful who say, man, did I work for a bunch of jerks over a long period of time?
You'd be surprised.
I think most of the people will say there was at least a good portion of people that were great leaders, strong, helped take care of you, had long-term vision, and helped you get there. So luckily I have more positive experiences to pull from everybody than I do negative ones. And, certainly you want to look and see, hey, here are some things I won't do.
Yeah.
When I get there,
which is probably more my style, which is like I've had experiences and I just think like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. And that's fine. And I think that's valuable piece, but I think you'll inherently not do those things because they're not in your nature anyway.
Right.
So kind of goes back to that whole
it's a good
focusing less on what I won't do, but focusing more on where I get really positive feedback and results. That to me is, it will come second nature anyway. And so choosing to look at those experiences that you've had with other leaders and say, here are the really cool things that I'm going to pull, is for me has always been beneficial.
Well, that was, I really appreciate that. And with that, Todd Hertzler, thank you so much for spending, I think, an hour and a half with me here today.
Thank you, Bezod. That was fun. I enjoyed it.
I'm happy to hear that. And I hope that people that listen to this, and I hope people watch this, and I hope that they walk away with a lot of the wisdom that I walked away with today. And you really changed my perspective on a couple of things, and that is really helpful to me, but also speaks to your qualities as a leader. So I appreciate it personally. I hope other people benefit from it as well.
Awesome. It was so much fun. Thank you, man.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.